Okay, so hopefully you got, in the previous one, you've blanket stitched all 7 of the hexagons, the half hexagons, and then you did the triangle. I want to pause for a second. I hope it's not been frustrating for you. If it has been, then I want to show you a different stitch. And this is the whip stitch. And I don't use it often because I feel like I like my stitching to show. Now, I don't like it to show as much as it does with the contrasting yellow gold thread, and that's why I'll go back in and put the aqua thread in instead. But I do like the stitches to show. I think they're part of the charm of the project. But sometimes maybe a whip stitch is more your style. So I'm going to try one out. So again, we're still on step 7, figuring out the stitches, and this one is a different stitch called a whip stitch. All right, guess what? I just stitched 2 in your sample, and that took 1 entire strand to go this far. So that tells you that you're going to go through your thread, and like I said, you're going to probably end up using all of it or awful close to all of it. But I want to whip stitch one of the hexagons down so that you can see. A whip stitch is just a straight stitch. It's not stitching through the loop. So I'm going to come from the back to the front. This time I actually am in the center, just through the sand, right at the margin of the sand and the wool. And I am going to whip stitch. And a whip stitch is a straight stitch. You can make it a little shorter than the 1/4 of an inch if you want to. But whip stitch, basically, you are going just over the edge. Now, with the exception of being at these hexagon points, these are fairly straight stitches. So I'm going in directly below this one, but I'm coming out at a diagonal to prep for the next one, 1/4 of an inch away for the next one. And then I'm going to come straight in on this one, and I'm going to swoop my needle and come out over there for the next one. And if you can get the hang of doing these pretty neat and even, or maybe even not neat and even, you just like the way they look, then by all means, don't hesitate to use this particular stitch. So that's the whip stitch. We draw it straight and stitch it, but when we come up, we're going to come up at an angle. And then we're going to come straight down in. And that's me doing it in one swoop. If you need to stab stitch, that's okay too. I'm going to come 1/4 of an inch away from along the border or margin. I'm going to come up to the top. I'm going to go back in straight below that to the back. Underneath, I'm going to come over at the margin again, about 1/4 of an inch away. And then I'm going to go straight to the back. And that's a whip stitch, and it's certainly absolutely doable. Now you'll note, and I'll have to get some stitch, or I'll show you the other sample, you know, these connect around the perimeter. These don't, they're just little legs that are holding the edge down so that it's permanent and hopefully can't fray. So I'm going to set this one down for a sec and just, I don't have any whip stitching on the previous one, but you'll get an idea of the difference in the stitching from one to the next. So think about that. Again, if it's a little frustrating trying to master the blanket stitch and you see that there's a lot of it to do, then try out, audition the whip stitch. If you're happy with that, it might be worth taking a few out and just employing that stitch instead. Something to think about, and it's always good to have an option.